July of 1911, an American historian named Hiram Bingham was moving slowly through the high Andes of Peru, following narrow mountain paths that few outsiders had ever walked. He was not searching for Machu Picchu. At the time, his main goal was to locate the last capital of the Inca resistance, a place known from Spanish chronicles as Vilcabamba. What he found instead would quietly become one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Guided by local farmers who knew the mountains far better than any map, Bingham climbed toward a steep ridge above the Urubamba River. Dense vegetation covered the slopes. Stone walls peeked through the greenery. As he reached the top, the forest opened, and a city emerged from the mist. Terraces stepped down the mountainside. Finely cut granite blocks formed walls that still stood straight after centuries of earthquakes and rain. Bingham later wrote that he felt as if he had stumbled into a place time had forgotten. The world would soon hear Machu Picchu described as a lost city. Newspapers repeated the phrase. Books followed. But from the beginning, this label was only partly true. Local Quechua families had always known the site was there. Farmers lived nearby. Some even cultivated land among the ruins. Machu Picchu was lost only to the outside academic world, hidden from written history rather than erased from memory. Bingham's early reports sparked global fascination. His photographs, published by National Geographic in 1913, showed something unexpected. This was not a small mountain village or a rough fortress. Machu Picchu was carefully designed. The terraces were not just agricultural steps, but part of a massive system to prevent landslides and control water. Temples were aligned with surrounding peaks, which the Inca considered sacred. Doorways and windows were shaped with precision that suggested deep planning, not hurried construction. At first, scholars quickly placed Machu Picchu into a familiar narrative. It was labeled a royal estate built in the 15th century for the Inca emperor Pachacuti, the ruler who transformed the Inca from a regional power into an empire. This explanation fit well with what was known about Inca expansion. Pachacuti commissioned grand projects. He favored mountain retreats, and radiocarbon dates from organic material at the site suggested occupation during his reign. Yet even as this idea spread, questions began to surface. Machu Picchu appeared to have been occupied for only a short time, possibly less than a century, before being abandoned during the Spanish conquest. Why invest such immense effort into a city that would be used so briefly? Spanish chroniclers, who documented Inca cities, roads, and rituals in great detail, never mentioned Machu Picchu at all, not once. For a site of this scale, the silence was striking. Then there was the stonework. Many Inca sites use a mix of rough and refined masonry, but Machu Picchu's finest buildings show stones cut so precisely that even today, a blade cannot slide between them. The blocks fit without mortar, corners locked together. Walls lean slightly inward, a known technique for earthquake resistance. Early surveys showed that this was not accidental craftsmanship. It was consistent, deliberate, and technically demanding. Photographs taken during Bingham's early expeditions revealed details that raised more doubts. Some structures seemed built directly on bedrock, shaped to fit the walls above it. Others rested on deep foundations, hidden beneath the soil. This suggested a level of long-term planning that went beyond surface construction. The city was not simply placed on the mountain, it was integrated into it. As researchers began to study the site more closely, they noticed differences in building styles. Some walls were made from smaller stones, less refined but still sturdy. Others were constructed from massive granite blocks, shaped with extreme precision. This raised an important question. Was Machu Picchu built all at once, or did it develop over time? The lack of written records made answers difficult. The Inca did not use a written language in the way Europeans did. They relied on oral tradition and a system of knotted cords known as quipu. While quipu recorded numbers and administrative data, they do not provide clear historical narratives. Without texts describing Machu Picchu's founding, researchers were left to interpret the stones themselves. This is where the mystery deepened. Machu Picchu was clearly Inca in style and symbolism. The religious structures align with Inca cosmology. The road system connects to the wider Inca network. Artifacts found at the site match Inca material culture. At the same time, some aspects of its construction appeared unusually advanced, even by Inca standards. These observations did not lead serious researchers toward fantasy or unsupported ideas. Instead, they pointed to a more grounded possibility. The Incas were known to build on earlier sites. Across the Andes, they often incorporated older foundations, reworking them into imperial architecture. In some cases, they preserved earlier stonework they considered sacred or structurally superior. So the question shifted. Instead of asking whether the Incas built Machu Picchu, scholars began asking whether they built all of it. Bingham himself wrestled with this uncertainty. Over time, he revised his ideas about the site's purpose and identity. Was it a royal retreat, a religious center, or something else entirely? Later excavations added more pieces to the puzzle, but did not settle the debate. What makes Machu Picchu especially compelling is that it resists simple answers. It is not an example of a deep-sea mystery or a submerged civilization uncovered by underwater archaeology, yet it shares something important with unexplained ruins and ancient discoveries around the world. It exists at the edge of what can be proven, like sunken structures found beneath the ocean or lost underwater cities revealed by modern scanning. Machu Picchu forces researchers to work with incomplete evidence. By the time the world fully embraced Machu Picchu as a symbol of the Inca civilization, the deeper questions were already in place. Who first chose this mountain? Who planned the terraces beneath the visible city? Who laid the earliest stones that later builders may have refined? Standing above the clouds, Machu Picchu offers no inscriptions to guide us. It leaves behind stone, alignment, and silence. And that silence is what keeps the mystery alive. Was this city purely the vision of an Inca emperor, or does it preserve the work of forgotten Andean builders whose names never entered history? That question, quiet but persistent, is where the story truly begins. Long before the Inca Empire rose to power, the Andes were already one of the most complex human landscapes on Earth. To understand Machu Picchu, it helps to slow down and look deeper into this older world, because the mountain city did not appear in isolation. It was shaped by centuries of knowledge, trial, and adaptation passed down through generations who learned how to survive and even thrive in one of the most demanding environments imaginable. Archaeological evidence shows that people were living in the Andes thousands of years before the Incas emerged in the early 1200s. Cultures such as the Tiwanaku, centered near Lake Titicaca, and the Wari, whose influence stretched across much of modern-day Peru, developed advanced systems of stone construction, road networks, terraced farming, and water control. These societies did not leave behind written histories, but they left something just as powerful. They left stone. Many of the techniques later associated with the Inca were already present long before Cusco became an imperial capital. Carefully shaped blocks, precisely aligned structures, and cities designed to work with the natural landscape rather than against it were not sudden inventions. They were the result of long experimentation in a land where mistakes could be deadly. The Andes are not forgiving. Steep slopes drop sharply into river valleys. Earthquakes are common. Rain can fall heavily for months, soaking the soil and triggering landslides. At the altitude of Machu Picchu, oxygen is thinner, temperatures shift quickly, and usable farmland is limited. Building anything permanent here requires an intimate understanding of geology, water flow, and seasonal change. This is one of the most important clues when thinking about Machu Picchu's origins. The city sits on a narrow ridge between two peaks, above the Urubamba River. Beneath its visible stone buildings lies an unseen network of foundations and drainage channels. Modern studies estimate that as much as 60% of Machu Picchu's construction is underground, designed to stabilize the mountain and move water away from structures. This kind of engineering does not come from short-term planning. It suggests knowledge refined over generations. Someone understood how rain would move through the soil. Someone knew where bedrock could support heavy stone. Someone planned for earthquakes that had not yet happened. The Incas were masters of organization, and when they expanded across the Andes, they absorbed both land and knowledge. Historical and archaeological records show that they often built their most important centers on top of older sacred sites. In places like Cusco itself, earlier walls were incorporated into later Inca buildings. This was not laziness. It was respect for what already worked. Inca builders recognized strong foundations and reused them. They preserved older stonework that had proven durable. Sometimes they reshaped it. Other times they simply built around it. This practice makes it difficult to determine where one phase of construction ends and another begins, especially at a place like Machu Picchu, where excavation is limited to protect the site. Radiocarbon dating provides useful but incomplete answers. Organic material found at Machu Picchu, such as charcoal and human remains, suggests the site was occupied mainly during the 15th century. This fits with the reign of Pachacuti, but occupation dates are not the same as construction dates. A building can be used long after its foundation is laid, just as sunken structures discovered through underwater archaeology often reveal multiple phases of human activity layered over time. Researchers studying lost underwater cities or submerged civilizations face similar challenges. When divers map ancient ocean discoveries, they often find structures reused, repaired, or altered by later cultures. Machu Picchu, though high above sea level, presents the same kind of puzzle. It is an unexplained ruin, not because it is unreachable, but because its layers of history overlap. The natural environment reinforces this idea. Machu Picchu's terraces are not simply farming platforms. They are carefully engineered systems designed to anchor soil and channel water. Each terrace has multiple layers: stone, gravel, sand, and topsoil. This design allows rainwater to drain instead of building pressure that could collapse the slope. Such systems reflect deep local knowledge. They mirror techniques seen in older Indian sites far from Machu Picchu, suggesting shared traditions rather than isolated invention. This does not mean the Incas lacked skill. On the contrary, it shows they were excellent at recognizing and perfecting methods that already existed. What historians debate is timing. Some argue Machu Picchu was entirely planned and built within a few decades as part of an imperial vision. Others believe the Incas inherited a partially prepared landscape, refining and expanding it into the city we see today. Both sides rely on real evidence, and neither claim certainty. Spanish records complicate matters further. When the Spanish arrived in the Andes in the 1530s, they documented Inca cities, temples, and roads extensively. Machu Picchu does not appear in these accounts. This absence could be explained by geography. The site is remote, hidden by mountains and forest. It may have been abandoned before the Spanish reached the region. Still, the silence raises questions. If Machu Picchu was a major royal estate, why was it not mentioned alongside other important centers? Some scholars suggest it was already falling out of use. Others propose it served a more specialized purpose, perhaps seasonal or ceremonial, making it less visible to chroniclers. Environmental evidence adds another layer. Pollen analysis and soil studies suggest the area around Machu Picchu was shaped by human hands long before the 15th century. Forests were cleared and regrown. Terraces were modified. These subtle signs point to repeated human presence over time, not a single moment of creation. Standing on the ridge today, it becomes clear why Machu Picchu defies simple classification. It feels both carefully planned and deeply ancient. Like submerged structures found beneath coastal waters, it hints at histories that are only partially visible. The stones speak, but not loudly. They require patience. This chapter does not claim hidden builders or forgotten civilizations without evidence. Instead, it highlights a real and ongoing scholarly discussion. Machu Picchu sits at a crossroads of Andean history, shaped by an environment that demanded knowledge, continuity, and respect for what came before. The Incas were almost certainly its final great caretakers. They used it, honored it, and left their mark on it. Whether they were also its first builders remains an open question, not because of mystery for mystery's sake, but because the Andes themselves preserve history in layers. Like deep-sea mystery sites revealed slowly through careful mapping, Machu Picchu reveals its past one stone at a time. And as long as excavation is limited and records remain silent, its earliest chapter will stay just beyond full certainty, waiting between the mountain and the clouds. When researchers study Machu Picchu today, they often begin with the stones. Not the view, not the legends, not even the history, just the stones themselves. Because unlike stories, stone does not exaggerate. It records decisions, skills, and limits with quiet honesty. Walking through the site, one of the first things that becomes clear is that Machu Picchu was not built in a single style. Some walls are made of rough field stones, carefully stacked but uneven, held in place by gravity and smart placement. Others are smooth, tight, and precise, formed from granite blocks shaped to fit together so closely that gaps are nearly impossible to find. These two styles exist side by side, sometimes within the same structure. Archaeologists noticed long ago that the finest stonework appears in the most important places. Temples, ceremonial buildings, and key structural walls use ashlar masonry, where each block is shaped individually to lock into its neighbors. Ordinary dwellings and support buildings use simpler methods. This pattern is consistent with known Inca practices. Precision was reserved for places of ritual importance or structural necessity. The question is not whether the Incas could do this work. They clearly could. The question is how it was done and over what span of time. Granite is hard stone. Shaping it requires patience more than power. Excavations and tool finds across the Andes show that Inca builders relied mainly on stone hammers, harder stones used for pounding and pecking, along with bronze or copper alloy tools for finer work. They did not have iron. They did not use wheels for hauling stone. There is no evidence of advanced cutting machines or unknown technology. To test what these tools could achieve, archaeologists and experimental builders have tried to replicate Inca methods. Using hammer stones, they shaped granite blocks slowly, striking again and again, checking fit constantly. The results showed that it is possible, but it takes time, a lot of time, and coordination, and experienced hands. This matters because Machu Picchu is not a small site. Its largest stones weigh many tons. Moving them uphill, shaping them precisely, and fitting them into earthquake-resistant walls would have required a large workforce and careful planning. This kind of effort is not something that happens quickly, especially at high altitude. One of the strongest pieces of evidence comes from what lies beneath the visible walls. Machu Picchu's drainage system is one of its most impressive features, though most visitors never see it. Channels cut into stone direct rainwater away from buildings. Layers beneath the terraces filter and slow water as it moves downhill. Without this system, the city would have collapsed long ago under heavy rainfall. Engineers studying the site have pointed out that these drainage systems had to be designed before the buildings were completed. You cannot easily add them later. This suggests long-term planning from the very start. Whoever designed Machu Picchu understood the mountain deeply. The walls themselves are also part of the engineering. Many lean slightly inward, a subtle feature that helps them resist earthquakes. Doorways and windows are trapezoidal, wider at the bottom than the top, which adds stability. These are not decorative choices. They are responses to a living, moving landscape. When scientists document unexplained ruins elsewhere, especially sunken structures examined through underwater archaeology, they often focus on similar details: how stones were shaped, how weight was distributed, how water was managed, whether the site sits naturally in its environment or fights against it. Machu Picchu belongs in this category of careful human adaptation, even though it stands far above sea level. The variation in stonework raises a deeper debate. Some researchers argue that all of Machu Picchu was built during the height of the Inca Empire, using different styles for different purposes. Others believe the differences point to multiple phases of construction. Perhaps some foundations and walls existed before the Incas arrived, later refined and expanded using imperial resources. This idea is not radical. It reflects what is known from other Andean sites. The Incas often inherited older sacred landscapes. They built on top of them, reshaped them, and made them part of their political and spiritual system. In doing so, they preserved earlier work rather than erase it. Radiocarbon dating does not easily resolve this question. Organic material found at Machu Picchu tells us when people lived there, not when the stones were first placed. Stone does not carry a date. Archaeologists must rely on context, style, and comparison. Some of the most precise masonry at Machu Picchu resembles work found at other major Inca sites like Cusco. Yet in some areas, the stone shaping looks different, less standardized, as if produced by hands trained in another tradition. This does not prove earlier builders were present, but it keeps the question open. What is important is what researchers do not claim. There is no serious evidence for lost tools, unknown machines, or vanished civilizations beyond the Indian world. The mystery here is not about missing technology. It is about timing, labor, and continuity. The scale of coordination required to build Machu Picchu is often underestimated. Workers had to quarry stone, transport it across uneven ground, shape it precisely, and assemble it without mortar. They also had to feed and house large numbers of laborers in a remote location. The Inca state could organize such efforts, but doing so would still take years, possibly decades. If construction stretched over generations, this would explain the mix of styles. Early builders could have laid foundations and terraces. Later ones could have refined key structures. Each phase would reflect the skills and priorities of its time. Similar patterns appear in ancient ocean discoveries, where submerged cities show layers of rebuilding as coastlines shifted and cultures adapted. While Machu Picchu is not a deep-sea mystery, it shares the same archaeological challenge. Human landscapes evolve. They are reused, reshaped, and reimagined. One detail often overlooked is repair. Stone buildings need maintenance. Earthquakes damage walls. Heavy rains undermine terraces. The presence of different masonry styles could also reflect repair work carried out over time, using available techniques and materials. This further complicates attempts to define a single construction moment. Modern mapping and laser scanning have helped clarify how carefully Machu Picchu was planned. These studies show alignment between buildings, water channels, and bedrock. Nothing appears random. Even the rougher walls follow clear logic. In the end, the stones do not point to a single dramatic answer. They point to patience, to skill passed down, to builders who understood stone the way sailors understand currents, learning through experience rather than instruction manuals. In that sense, Machu Picchu belongs alongside other unexplained ruins, not because it defies science, but because it reflects human ability working at the edge of what evidence can fully explain. Whether the city represents the absolute peak of Inca engineering or the continuation of older Andean traditions remains an open discussion. What the stones show clearly and consistently is that Machu Picchu was not rushed, not careless, and not improvised. It was built by people who knew exactly what they were doing. The only question left is how many generations stood behind those hands, shaping the mountain long before the final walls rose into the clouds. By the late 20th century, Machu Picchu had moved far beyond the moment of discovery. It was no longer just a dramatic ruin revealed to the outside world by Hiram Bingham. It had become one of the most studied archaeological sites in the Americas. And with that attention came debate, not loud or sensational, but careful, measured, and often deeply thoughtful. Today, the dominant academic position is clear and grounded in evidence. Most historians and archaeologists agree that Machu Picchu was closely tied to the reign of the Inca emperor Pachacuti, who ruled from around 1438 to 1471. Under his leadership, the Inca state expanded rapidly, both in territory and ambition. Monumental building projects became tools of power, faith, and identity. Within this view, Machu Picchu is interpreted as a royal estate or ceremonial center. Its location fits Inca ideas of sacred geography. The surrounding mountains, known as apus, were believed to be living spirits. The alignment of temples with solstices and peaks reflects known Inca religious practices. Roads connect the site to Cusco and the wider imperial network. Artifacts recovered there match Inca material culture of the 15th century. From this perspective, Machu Picchu represents the height of Inca planning and engineering, a place designed for elite use rather than a dense urban population. It was likely seasonal, occupied by nobles, priests, and skilled workers, rather than thousands of permanent residents. This explains why it could be abandoned relatively quietly during the chaos of the Spanish conquest. But even within this framework, questions remain. One of the most discussed issues is scale. Machu Picchu is enormous for a site that may have been used for only a few decades. The labor investment is staggering. Terraces reshape an entire mountainside. Drainage systems extend beneath nearly every structure. Stones were quarried, shaped, and moved with extraordinary care. Some scholars ask whether this level of effort makes sense for such a short period of use, even for an emperor as powerful as Pachacuti. Others point to the silence of Spanish records. Chroniclers like Pedro Chiesa de Leon and Bernabe Cobo documented Inca society in detail. They described cities, temples, rituals, and royal estates. Machu Picchu is never mentioned. This absence does not prove the site was unknown, but it does raise questions. If it was an important royal center, why did it leave no trace in written history? Some historians argue the explanation is simple. Machu Picchu may have already been abandoned by the time Spaniards consolidated control in the region. Disease, civil war, and forced labor systems disrupted Inca society long before full documentation could occur. A remote mountain retreat could easily slip through the cracks. Others are less certain. They suggest Machu Picchu's role may have been more specialized than previously thought. Perhaps it was never meant to be widely known, even within the empire. Perhaps it served a specific ritual or administrative function that did not require long-term occupation or mention in chronicles. Human remains found at the site added another layer to the debate. Early studies conducted in the early 20th century suggested that most skeletons were female. This led to theories that Machu Picchu was home to acolytes, women selected for religious service or elite households. The idea shaped public understanding for decades. Later research, however, told a different story. Using improved methods, including DNA analysis and more accurate skeletal assessment, researchers found that the population was more balanced in terms of sex. This discovery forced scholars to rethink earlier conclusions. Machu Picchu was not a city of women alone. Its residents came from different regions of the empire, suggesting a diverse community brought together intentionally. This shift did not undermine the Inca connection. Instead, it highlighted how interpretation changes as evidence improves. What once seemed clear becomes more complex, and complexity is where real history lives. Another area of discussion involves labor organization. The Inca state used a system known as mita, a form of labor tax where communities contributed workers to state projects. Building Machu Picchu would have required thousands of laborers, stone specialists, planners, and overseers. Some scholars argue this could have been organized efficiently within a short time. Others believe the scale points to construction spread over longer periods, possibly incorporating earlier phases. This is where the idea of cultural inheritance enters the conversation. Across the Andes, Inca builders reused and respected older sites. They did not always erase what came before. Instead, they absorbed it. This practice makes it difficult to separate Inca innovation from inherited tradition. Importantly, no serious scholar claims Machu Picchu was built by unknown outsiders or lost civilizations disconnected from Andean history. The debate stays firmly within documented cultural contexts. It focuses on how knowledge was passed down, how landscapes were reused, and how power reshaped existing spaces. In this sense, Machu Picchu shares something with sites studied in underwater archaeology. When researchers investigate sunken structures or lost underwater cities, they often find multiple layers of occupation: a harbor rebuilt after storms, a temple repaired over centuries, a shoreline settlement gradually submerged as sea levels changed. The mystery is not who humans were, but how long they were there and how they adapted. Machu Picchu presents the same challenge on land. Stone walls do not announce their age. Foundations do not come with inscriptions. Archaeologists must piece together clues from style, wear, context, and comparison. Each method adds clarity, but none offers a final answer. What matters is how scholars approach this uncertainty. Debate does not mean chaos. It does not mean fringe ideas dominate the field. It means researchers question assumptions, test new methods, and revise conclusions when evidence demands it. Institutions like Yale University, which held many artifacts from Bingham's expedition for decades, and the Peruvian Ministry of Culture, which oversees the site today, continue to support research that refines understanding without sensationalism. Laser scanning, soil analysis, and conservation studies all contribute small pieces to a larger picture. The mystery of Machu Picchu survives not because it is unknowable, but because it sits at the limits of what evidence can currently show. Some answers may never be complete. Excavation is restricted to protect the site. Organic materials decay, oral traditions fade, and yet this does not weaken the story. It strengthens it. Machu Picchu does not need exaggeration to be compelling. Its power lies in the quiet space between certainty and possibility. Scholars agree on much. The Incas used the site. They shaped it profoundly. They left behind a masterpiece of engineering and belief. Where debate continues is in the earliest chapters of that story. How much of the mountain was already prepared before Inca hands refined it? How long did construction truly take? How many generations contributed to what we see today? These questions remain open not because history has failed, but because history is careful. Like explorers mapping submerged civilizations inch by inch, researchers at Machu Picchu move slowly, respecting both the site and the evidence. The stones are patient. They have waited centuries already, and as long as scholars continue to listen closely, the debate itself becomes part of the story. A reminder that understanding the past is not about rushing to answers, but about learning how to ask better questions. Today, Machu Picchu is no longer hidden behind vines or rumor. It is one of the most carefully documented archaeological sites in the world. And yet, even now, standing in the age of satellites and scanners, its deepest questions remain quietly unresolved. Over the last few decades, researchers have returned to the mountain with tools Hiram Bingham could never have imagined. High-resolution satellite imagery has mapped the surrounding ridges and valleys in detail, revealing faint traces of ancient roads that extend beyond the visible city. Laser scanning, known as LiDAR, has allowed scientists to see through vegetation and identify buried terraces, retaining walls, and pathways that were once invisible from the ground. These studies have shown that Machu Picchu is not an isolated marvel. It is part of a broader engineered landscape. Stone stairways connect distant sectors. Agricultural terraces continue beyond tourist paths. Foundations beneath the soil suggest structures that were planned but never completed, or perhaps completed and later dismantled. The city we see today is only part of a larger system that once shaped the entire ridge. This kind of discovery feels familiar to archaeologists working in very different environments. In underwater archaeology, teams mapping sunken structures often find that what first appeared to be a single ruin is actually part of a wider network. A harbor leads to a submerged road. A collapsed wall reveals deeper foundations. Lost underwater cities rarely exist alone. Machu Picchu follows the same pattern, except its layers are buried by earth and forest rather than water. Modern surveys have also confirmed how deeply the city was anchored into the mountain. Beneath plazas and temples lie thick layers of stone and gravel designed to drain water and prevent collapse. These hidden elements make up most of the construction effort. The visible beauty rests on an invisible base. And yet, for all this clarity, some questions refuse to settle. No written record tells us who first chose this mountain. Spanish chronicles remain silent. Inca oral traditions, passed down through generations, speak broadly of sacred places and royal estates, but never name Machu Picchu directly. The absence is striking, not because it suggests secrecy, but because it reminds us how fragile historical memory can be. There is also no definitive construction timeline. Radiocarbon dates tell us when people lived and worked there, but not when the earliest stones were placed. Excavation is limited by necessity. Machu Picchu is both a research site and a living monument. Dig too deeply, and the very evidence researchers hope to protect could be damaged forever. This creates a boundary that science must respect. Unlike submerged civilizations studied in deep-sea mystery expeditions, where remote-operated vehicles can scan untouched areas beneath the ocean, Machu Picchu exists in the open air, visited by thousands each day. Preservation comes first. Answers come slowly. As a result, some possibilities may never be fully confirmed. Were the earliest terraces laid generations before Pachacuti? Did Inca builders inherit a prepared landscape and refine it into something greater? Or was the entire project a bold but brief imperial vision, abandoned before it could leave a trace in written history? None of these questions rely on fantasy. They arise from evidence that points in more than one direction at once. This tension is what keeps Machu Picchu alive in the modern imagination. It is not a puzzle because it defies explanation, but because it resists simplification. The stones tell us what was done, but not always when, and not always by whom. Researchers continue to work carefully within these limits. Teams from Peruvian institutions, international universities, and conservation groups study erosion patterns, soil layers, and stoneware. Each detail adds a small piece to the picture. A path worn deeper than expected suggests heavier traffic. A wall repaired differently hints at change over time. A buried foundation implies earlier planning. These are quiet discoveries, They do not make headlines, but together they slowly reshape understanding. The public fascination with Machu Picchu often focuses on dramatic questions, but scholars are drawn to subtler ones. How did knowledge move across generations without written plans? How did builders coordinate work at such altitude? How did they maintain the city against constant rain and seismic stress? In these questions, Machu Picchu becomes less about mystery and more about humanity. It reflects how societies adapt, reuse, and build upon what they inherit. Much like ancient ocean discoveries that show coastal communities adjusting to rising seas, Machu Picchu shows people responding to a demanding landscape with care rather than conquest. What also endures is the emotional pull of the place itself. Visitors describe a strange sense of balance, as if the city belongs exactly where it is. That feeling is not accidental. It comes from alignment, proportion, and integration with nature. These qualities suggest builders who were thinking beyond a single lifetime. It is possible that the earliest contributors to Machu Picchu never imagined how famous it would become. They may not have seen it as a destination at all, but as part of a sacred geography that extended across the Andes. Later builders, including the Incas, may have recognized its value and chosen to preserve and elevate it. This layered history is not unique. Archaeologists studying unexplained ruins around the world often find that what looks like one civilization's achievement is actually the result of many hands over time. Cities are not born fully formed. They grow, pause, adapt, and sometimes fade. Machu Picchu's fading was unusual only in how complete it was. Protected by its location, it avoided destruction. Protected by silence, it avoided rewriting. When it re-entered global awareness in the 20th century, it did so largely intact. That intactness can be misleading. It gives the impression of a single moment frozen in time. In reality, Machu Picchu is a long conversation between people and stone, spread across decades or centuries. The unanswered questions are not failures of research. They are signs of honesty. Science does not fill gaps with guesses. It names uncertainty and waits. This is why Machu Picchu continues to inspire both careful scholarship and quiet wonder. It sits in the space between what is known and what can be proven. It invites us to look closely without demanding quick conclusions. In that sense, Machu Picchu stands alongside the world's most compelling ancient sites, whether they are buried beneath forests or lying as sunken structures beneath the sea. They all remind us that human history is not a straight line. It is layered, fragile, and often incomplete. The mountain keeps its earliest secrets not out of defiance, but out of time. Stone lasts longer than memory. Plans outlast names. Builders disappear, but their work remains. And so Machu Picchu endures, not as a riddle meant to be solved once and for all, but as a record of human effort at its most thoughtful. A place shaped by knowledge passed down, refined, and preserved without explanation. Its greatest mystery may not be who built it first, but how much of our own past still lies just beyond reach, waiting patiently for the right questions to be asked.